We're here to talk about sea slugs today. We'll talk about what they are. We'll examine one specific type of sea slug more in depth, that is the sap-sucking slugs. We'll cover what makes these sap-sucking slugs special. We'll go over my top 10 sap-sucking slugs and where to find them. And lastly, some things to consider when looking for these tiny subjects. This is the hand signal we use for nudies here. I've seen other signals used. This can be used for both nudies and all kinds of sea slugs. Sea slug is a general term for all slugs that live in the sea. Latest information that I was able to cull had the numbers at more than 700 species identified in a very big range of shapes, sizes, and colors. Now, there's been a reclassification, and epistebranch is now used as an informal name. For the sake of simplicity, I'm showing the old classification structure here under that informal name and subclass. To generalize, there are a bunch of suborders under the subclass epistebranch. 5 of them are considered the big ones, which you see listed here. These include sea hares, side-gilled slugs, head-shield slugs, and the oft-celebrated order nudies. You're likely already aware of the wild and beautiful variety of colors that these can come in. All nudies are sea slugs, but not all sea slugs are nudies. We're here to talk about the Sacaglosa, otherwise known as sap-sucking slugs. In general, these slugs are following a natural trend, evolution, towards a loss of their shell. The shell can be gone, which is called a nude or naked slug. It can be very small and diminished within the slug, also known as semi-nude, or it's still there, perhaps smaller or thinner. Slugs can be important in other ways. Some are used to make medication. They've been used in the study of memory processes and cancer research. And although the research continues, some researchers have discovered that they might also be a possible source of food for large corals. Sea slugs camouflage themselves quite well, blending with their background. Sometimes they curl themselves up or squash themselves down and hide their rhinophores to blend in. They can be see-through and are generally small, at times even microscopic. What are sap-sucking slugs and why are they special? These guys are mostly vegetarians. Many are considered kleptoplasts. That's a special ability they developed to steal a particular function called photosynthesis. That means they utilize the chloroplasts they have sucked out of their algal food source and keep these chloroplasts alive and functioning for energy. If you recall from biology class, chloroplasts need the sun to produce this energy. That's why some have dubbed these cell suckers solar-powered slugs. Sap-sucking slugs have a row of sharp teeth which they use to puncture the cell structure of the algae. That's how they get the chloroplasts out. Many take on the greenish appearance of their food, although some also eat the eggs of other species. If you take a close look, you can see the teeny tiny eggs in a spiral formation that this lettuce slug seems to be consuming. So, how do we know it's a sap-sucking slug? Well, most Sacaglosa have either rolled tube-like rhinophores or solid rhinophores and no oral tentacles, which often look like a second set. Here you can see that second set on a nudibranch. The oral tentacles are lower than the rhinophores and can also resemble a mustache. Sap-sucking slugs may also have wing-like flaps called parapodia. Some slugs use these in a flapping motion in the water column to swim. And this is just a small selection of the Cozumel sap-sucking slugs. In no particular order, these are my top 10. We'll start with number 10. The lettuce sea slug facilitates a gas exchange, like breathing, through the ruffles on its back. These ruffles resemble curly leaf lettuce, the appearance of which gives it its common name. It's often found here in shallow coral reef areas, blending well in and around the sand. Here it looks quite colorful, but it often has that, beautiful green spotted part of it there hidden away. and just the ruffles are visible, and they actually blend in very well with the sand around it. These are easiest to find in shallow water dive sites like San Clemente and UCAP Tormentos. Number 9, the painted Elysia. These are really great to look for when you're starting out looking for these guys because they're pretty tiny, but they're brightly colored, and they can be found all over the reefs, on all reefs pretty much. More abundant at certain times of the year, but they can be found year-round. And they can be found on those very bright green tufts of moss-like algae that are everywhere. The ornate Elysia, my number 8, easily distinguished by the orange and thin black striped border on the parapodia. They can often be found flapping in the current on Hinxia algae. That's the one that is very long and hair-like. Number 7 is the lined Elysia. These guys are typically found on pinecone algae in shallow reef areas too. They tend to be kind of curled up on there, and it might be difficult to see the stripes unless you're looking at them through a magnifying glass. These guys blend in pretty well. Number 6, probably the most adorable. These tiny creatures known as Shaun the sheep. The Costacella here has a tiny blue eye spot over its little eyes that distinguish it from Costacellas in other parts of the world. And these guys can be found everywhere on the reef that you see paddle algae. They're just teeny tiny, so you need a magnifying glass. And please remember, care of the reef is our first priority. Coming in at number 5, the ever so glamorous harlequin glass slug. They're not small. They're easy to see with the naked eye, and they're beautiful, but not so common. When we do find them, it's most often at night in those rubbly areas between the coral heads, and generally very shallow. The number 4 on my list is the Antilles oxino. These guys have little kind of science fiction-like rugged spikes around their bodies. Also not the easiest to find. They're kind of random on pinecone algae. I've seen them between coral heads, probably most of the time between about 60 and 70 feet. The Antilles glass slug is another glass slug and a very, very tiny speck that's even harder to spot due to the fact that they're see-through. I've only seen these at night ever, and I suspect they're very good at squeezing into tiny spaces during the day. They are in algae, also between the reefs, mostly pinecone algae, and then they move pretty quickly if you're shining your light on them, probably because they don't like the light. And if you take your eyes off of them for a moment, then they're gone. Number 2, the velvet Elysia. This little green guy, comes in a variety of greens that match the algae on which it feeds. These are pretty well camouflaged, and I've seen them on a variety of algae in reefs to 60 feet. It's getting harder and harder to describe where to find these. Pretty much on anything green, down to 60 feet. Anywhere from 60 feet and shallower, I look for these. And my number 1 favorite slug to find, the Thurdilla mazda. I think it's probably easy to confuse them with the painted Elysia because of their shape and how colorful they are. If you want to distinguish these guys from the painted Elysia, the painted Elysia have bright red markings on the tips of the rhinophores. These are pretty uncommon here. Every time I see one of these guys, it's in a different area, and they never seem to be on the same substrate twice. That was just a tiny part of the fun macro life that's waiting for you here in Cozumel. Don't forget, when you're looking for these tiny subjects, to be sure to observe excellent buoyancy skills. Do be careful with your equipment and fins. Any bit of turbulence can send these creatures flying and destroy their delicate habitat. Please stay off the bottom when taking photos. Many wild and wonderful creatures live there. Sometimes we can't see them. We look forward to diving with you all soon.